to Majita Road and back. But she never really resented that. I knew Didi had a soft heart for me. In my favorite photograph of the two of us, we are on a tiny little tricycle going round and round in the Vera. When I was small, I was a total chamchi of my sister, trying to do exactly as she said and did. Perhaps this was why, for much of our childhood, she treated me as if I was completely stupid. You don't know anything, was her standard remark for me, and it was I, and no one but I, who was responsible for creating this image of myself. Every time she wanted a break from learning her lessons and felt like a little entertainment, she would summon me. Deepti, chal, chuchi banja. Deepti, come on, now become stupid. And I would instantly transform, become a chuchi, start babbling in totally zaban, turning all my R's and D's into L's, twisting the corner of my frock around my little finger, narrating some fictitious story. And all that. I went. Didi would enjoy this act of mine for a few minutes and have a hearty laugh, but once she'd had enough of me, she'd suddenly command, "Acha bas, hun theek ho ja." Okay, enough now, you become alright. And instantly I'd straighten up, become completely normal, at once disconnecting myself from this desperate creature of a minute ago. Both of us would quickly return to our books, me to my impossible math, and Didi to her geography lessons. As a performer, I believe these were my beginnings.
Are you enjoying reading? Are you all enjoying listening? You know, it's always, you don't know where to stop, where to begin, where to just keep chatting. But I know one thing, I told her, it's very difficult that you eventually figure out which is the right medium for you to express your being. Maybe at some age you do manage, and maybe, there's a small, there was this documentary which I saw, and it was about renowned filmmaker, Tarkovsky, and his whole point was trying to find a medium to express his being, and he found cinema. So when I read her book, I felt, because she's a screenplay writer, she makes films, she's made a film, she's acted. But I just feel maybe, after reading the book, I just feel this is it. There's a wonderful poem in Hindi. I'd like to say a couplet of it. बाकी कविता शब्दों से नहीं लिखी जाती, बाकी कविता शब्दों से नहीं लिखी जाती, पूरे अस्तित्व को खींच कर एक वीरान की तरफ कहीं छोड़ दी जाती. So there comes the time when you live and you get the inner calling to express. She's painted. It's a wonderful memory where all of a sudden we know she was a painter. I would love it if she reads Blue Frock. Correct? Fiasco. It's the, yeah? Correct, no? 143. Blue Frock of Diwali. But it's a fiasco, but must. There's that one line which just, all of a sudden I remember this film called Loving Vincent, which is, Van Gogh, and the 100 painters, it's a painting animation, and all of a sudden you feel that happened with that one line, I'll say, when she is. So I think this is her calling right now.
Hello, hello. Yeah. Here in this chapter, I've been describing the Shera and how kids, you go, and how Diwali was celebrated at home. We had this Mochi Mohalla in the back of the house. The house was adjacent to the mosque, and on the terrace where we slept every night for the first 19 years of my life, it was overlooking the mosque. So there's this, between the mosque and the house is this gully, and the Mochi Mohalla, the cobblers, who were refugees from Rajasthan, they had come and settled here. One Diwali night was particularly eventful. I would later remember it as the blue frock fiasco. I must have been about 7 years old then. In preparation for Diwali that year, Mama had cut out from Woman and Home a beautiful picture of 2 little white girls wearing identical frocks. The frocks were a rich, deep blue with gathers at the waist. Dainty white lace frills hung off the edges of the collars and sleeves. Mama wanted the exact same blue frock stitched for Didi and me for this Diwali. She had a very fine piece of white muslin lying in the wooden almirah, which she decided to get dyed a brilliant blue. The muslin was pulled out from the cupboard one afternoon and taken to the rangwala, who dyed it the same blue. Mama carried the magazine with her to show Color Singh. I would call him, in my mind, I would call him Color Singh. To show Color Singh what exactly she desired. As blue as this, she told him, nothing less. It's called Prussian blue. Now my mother was a painter, so the color tones will keep coming up in the book. It's called Prussian blue. Yes, yes, he assured her. Then the old Sardar tailor from across the house was called in. I want the exact same pattern, she said, placing the magazine in front of him. The old man got down to work immediately, Diwali being just a day away. The day of Diwali, I was very excited. Every now and then I'd run to the thada to check if the frocks were ready. Day turned to evening, and evening came to be night. But this Diwali night, the frocks did not get stitched on time. Though the darzi stayed up till late working on them, little blue strips scattered all around him. Both Didi and I waited. I remember we didn't light up patakas that year. We simply waited on the thada for the tailor to finish sewing on the hooks and buttons and hemming the sleeves and collars so that we could get to wear our new frocks before the night was over. I walked up to the terrace and leaned over the edge looking down at the Mochi dwellings. How beautiful their homes appeared, lit with oil lamps, the sound of their nightly dholak more rigorous, the singing more intense. The mud houses glowed with freshly coated walls, and the white powder motifs painted on the thresholds and around windows. The scene looked like it was out of a picture book. Yes, despite the lamps and the rangoli and the music, there was something sad about this Diwali night. On our terrace, we had not lit the candles. As the night wore on, the festivity around us began to fade. The firecrackers that had lit up the sky a while ago, creating a fantastic backdrop for the white minarets of the mosque, had dwindled to a handful of flashes here and there. Children around the neighborhood had finished bursting the last of their crackers for the night and were now going back inside their homes. This was the quietest Diwali for us girls. The thunder of explosions and dazzle of lights had died down. Only one yellow bulb still glowed. The old Sardar Darzi, sitting on his wooden stool, working away in his modest establishment, giving the finishing touches to our frocks by hand. His was the last shop still open in the gully. Both Didi and I were quiet. Mama stood at the thada with us, sharing our disappointment. All the iron and wooden shutters of shops on our street had clanged shut, a finale to the Diwali night. We came back inside the house, time now to change into our pajamas and get into bed. This Diwali night was gone forever from our lives, uncelebrated. Suddenly there was a knock on the phatak. Without pausing to think, I ran to open the main gate. I perched on my toes to push up the iron latch so the small gate could be released open. In my heart, I knew whoever was knocking on our door at this hour could only be God sent. Sure enough, there he was, the old Sardar Darzi, standing in the dark, his face frayed and tilted to one side, both his arms stretched out. My eyes lit up at what I saw. Our very own Messiah, his grey beard and white turban glowing in the light of the street lamp, the Saviour himself. In his hands he held two hangers on which hung frocks of the most brilliant blue I'd ever seen. The old tailor's face had a faint smile of regret and benediction at the same time. I looked at the frocks and then at him. Didi came up behind me. There we were, two little girls, misty-eyed, gaping at the old man who stood Jesus-like, blue color dripping from his palms. Mama quickly changed us back from pajamas into our new blue frocks. That Diwali night, we were the last two girls up on a terrace, lighting firecrackers, invoking the gods, illuminating the dark skies. Thank you.
I don't know how anybody can write this. I don't know what. I mean, when I read the book, there is a chapter about imaginary world. My imaginary world. ये आवाज नहीं पहुंच रही क्या थिएटर वाले भी हैं no sorry my imaginary world, which means that there is this real world, so we don't know exactly what is real, and it's nothing to do with being spiritual about it, that life is one mithya. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about real, what is real happening in front of you. This is what we want to see. So please.
Hello? Yeah,
Take
I
us to
think
your-
every child has an imaginary world. We all here at least must have had an inner world, and we live there, and we thrive there. And it's beautiful.
And so you created one character within you when the reality happened.
Yeah.
Either she speaks or I speak, is it like that?
No.
Then my mind is off. Sorry, because of that.
Hello? Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. But it's a bad thing. It's called self-sense. Okay. So you had created an imaginary child within you. And what was it like? I mean, you when was that first which occurred to you? When did this world start?
I don't exactly remember that, but because I used to live in my inner world so much that I didn't quite at that time understand it as being so different from each other. It wasn't like that. I don't remember at what age. I remember when Mama used to narrate her Burma stories, I would always kind of extend that narration and direct it back towards me, like as if it's my experience and I'm part of Mama's narration. I would plant myself into it. You know, अगर वो कहती थी कि in Mandalay we had this beautiful moat around the Mandalay Palace. Our house was just across the street, and we could see, you know, young boys and girls strumming the instrument and, you know, boating in the moat. I was always there in the moat, you know, which is, I think, normal for everyone, right? And I also would encounter my mother. I would encounter my mother. In one encounter, I see my mother. She was very beautiful. Right? I would see her. I would see her wearing a lungi and a Burmese, angie they wear, and her hair is long, and she's walking down, and I go up to her in my booties and my little frock, and she says, "Where?" Oh, I give her a lily. And she takes it, and then she's carrying the lilies in her hand, and she gives one to me. And then when she looks at me, she says, "Where did you get those eyes?" And I say, "From you." And it may sound a bit spooky, but to me it was the most natural thing to imagine that my mama, मेरी imagination में mama is asking me, "Where did you get those eyes?" And I say, "From you." And she gets a bit confused, and then she walks away, and I keep looking at her walking.
You know why I asked this? It's beautiful because there is a character called Bay, and she would call it Baby. And how is that story? Because Bay dies, and Bay dies, there is a very mystery to it, that she's an old lady who falls from...
Yeah, Bay was a real person who lived at the end of the street, on the right corner, beyond the mosque and the Kabila. She was up on I think the second floor. But in my imagination, I had made her, sit up in my house, the fourth terrace of our house at the absolute corner. So,
I would like to I want you to first tell what the whole, so that you don't have to read where, she died, that mysterious, whatever that death. And that Sudhakar thing, that's a little bit. What was the reason?
Bay was, I think she was a prominent character on that street. And she was a very proud, small woman. So when I plant her, and I call her Baby, she's now another character. She's taken from Bay, but she's gone beyond that. And she sits on the edge of this huge house, and she keeps watch over what's going on in the world, the Mochi Mahalla, the Buffalo Shed, the Dukandar niche case, and people, bicycles passing and going, people coming in. So I imagine that she's keeping tab on, everything is okay, right, So in my imagination, Bebe was in my imagination. When the real woman, when Bay died, there was some rumors about how she died, how she fell. She had a grandson who was very brilliant, Sardar boy. He came first in Punjab University, something like that happened, and she went all over the mahalla, boasting about her grandchild. And then when Moni was this boy, when he came back home, they had a fight. He said, "Why are you going around? You're telling Sudhakar ko aap bol rahe ho ki look at my grandson. You have been 4 years in the same class, and my grandson first in Punjab." So grandmother and grandson, they had this fight. That's all we know about. And then in the night, it was drizzling. It was rainy. We were sitting on the terrace, and slowly in the wee hours of the morning, windows start opening up. And we heard Raj Auntie upstairs, our tenants. She says, Beji, big pains, fallen, accident. And then, details filtered in. but in my mind.
But please chat. It feels so nice to hear you mention.
Yeah, I will. So this imaginary part only I'm going to read. In my mind, Bebe's death happened a little differently. Bebe fell like gossamer, not a sound, just a faint, far echo. A muffled blob of old flesh and bones made a low thud, slowly, lightly, floating down like a white chiffon dupatta that slips off the clothesline. Feather-like she fell in the empty street, wet from a night of rain. Tossed onto the ground, her brittle bones in a sack of old shriveled flesh created a silent splash as the jute doll thudded, bounced lightly, and then lay still, forever. Had Bebe fallen from the rooftop and died in pain, or had she met her end peacefully in her sleep? I got up and looked over the edge. Nothing there. Bebe must be fast asleep or in a delivery. I knocked on her door. No answer. I banged again on that creaky wooden door when finally, with my pushing it slightly, something inside clicked and the bolt slipped open. Slowly I entered the room and called for her. Baby, I whispered. Baby was lying among her chandeliers, still and without life, wrapped in her pink and orange pulkari, and her eyes were open forever. Who was Baby in my mind? I failed to analyze. In many ways, Baby is me, the writer, looking back at life, living in her inner world, keeping vigil over memories. Many years later, when I woke up in the middle of the night and walked across the Barsati in the drizzle, I saw her. There, standing at the edge of the rooftop, was a figure of a young woman clad in pale pink pulkari. I stood gazing. Baby, I whispered. Baby slowly turned her radiant face towards me and smiled. The night drizzled on. Thank you.
Yes, I think you should speak more. But the point is, this baby got created. Then, it's we cannot express, as we always say, that children can't express. Just don't tell them anything. Don't tell them about. I remember as a child when my grandmother died, I was not allowed to go to the crematorium because I was too small. Because I wouldn't be able to take pain. And I came to know much later what his death is all about. And there, when I read this book, she has a very, very important chapter about Sunny's death. And I don't know whether she should read, but at least she should speak about it. And her imagination, and maybe being a filmmaker as well, how she's managed to really juxtapose pain to painlessness. I think you should be able to maybe speak about it.
I can't tell about it.
Anyway, it's about, it comes from, I'll tell you, the chapter is called Crack in the
Picture Perfect.
Picture Perfect Frame. So it's about how your life is picture perfect and yet there is a crack.
Yeah, there have been memories, a few of them, of my parents' discord between them. My parents decided to move away from each other at a very late age in their life, almost in their 70s. But I, as a child, had seen, I remember a few instances. So I have talked in the book about that and how it impacted me and how it never really let me feel completely secure in any one relationship, thinking always that everything that seems perfect is going to end. No? So that kind of psychological effect or damage had been done, I guess, since childhood. But in this, then I also speak about my mother. Between me and my younger brother, there were 3 offspring that she gave birth to, and she lost all 3. There was some defect at birth that would happen, and only one child, a boy, survived for about 8 months. But after 8 months, he did come home. Otherwise, Mama was always, I remember coming back from the hospital empty-handed. This boy, Sunny, because he was with her for 8 months, so she could never really get over Sunny's death. She kept, till the end of her life, she kept narrating how Sunny passed away, how Sunny died in her arms, how he kept looking up at her face as if asking, Mama, can't you help me? Can't you save me? And she would keep repeating that. And I would try to, later of course she was suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. So I would, I would dissuade her from going back into those memories which were really painful for her. But I, in my chapter, I don't look at Sunny's death as such a monumental tragedy, because the baby could not, he lived for 8 months, but for those 8 months, I call them 8 months of breathlessness, he could not breathe properly. He couldn't breathe. So that little thing, either I will do that. That will be the last reading. Then we can all chat. From this, I've talked about how Mama narrates Sunny's death, and then I say from this point in the narrative, every time I tried to recreate Sunny's death in my mind, I have somehow only been able to see it from the other side. It was 6:30 in the evening when Sunny's eyes finally closed to the world, his little soul rising above the shadowy pillars of the veranda, above the blue-green painted windows of the green room, above the open to the sky fireplace on the first terrace. Lightly it moved beyond the barsati, passing by the tin shed, wafting feather-like around the white dome of the mosque, its 4 minarets and beyond. Higher above the gully, the Mochi Mohalla, where he could see the walled city speckled with lights, the sky engulfing it, the wet earth below turning to a mere shimmer. Sunny could see it all now with clarity. His mother and father turned into little specks on earth. 8 months of breathlessness, 8 months of a beautiful woman's warm bosom to bury his tiny face into, all sensations he carries now through the enormous sky. It was a night of shifting shadows. A bat flew low between the cowshed and the veranda. Mama touched her son's body. It was cold. The fever was gone. Life was gone out of him. The pain had ended. His face now appeared peaceful, calm. Sunny felt lifted. Swept through a white fog, its cool tingling. The wetness of the white poultice across his forehead no longer made him cry. He loved it, this new feeling of being tossed and thrown on this white foam. He danced about in the clouds, skidding on the unreal whiteness, a white mist that soothed and tingled him, a breeze that drove the pores of his bodiless being wide open. The winds swept him sideways and upside down, drowning him in this blinding whiteness. Sunny giggled, and a soundless ripple ran through the clouds, and then he was swept beyond even the clouds. He now saw a pitch-black expanse studded with bright sparkles of light. He was enchanted by the radiance, and he wanted it. He so wanted it. These were the very stars he had seen from the veranda, looking up from his mother's arms. He'd seen these tiny flickering lights in the sky, a sky endlessly fascinating, that had been far, far from his reach. But now it was here, so near to him, just fingertips away. It was all around him as he was being swept away towards the brilliance. Beneath him, a woman's heart-wrenching wail echoed in the universe. Mama stood in the veranda of the house, a shriek trapped within her, a shriek only her son could hear, and he looked back, smiling. Don't cry for me, Mama. I'm happy now. Look, the pain is gone. I'm happy. Then her legs gave way. She buried her face in her son's cold, still body and sank to the floor. Sunny laughed. By now he had moved beyond. He had become part of the glow in the sky, was one with the brilliance, leaving behind on his last journey the echo of a woman who'd been, for 8 good months, his mother on earth. I also imagine an evening, days after Sunny's death, I'm sitting in one end of the veranda and Mama's on the swing, gently swaying. A bat flies low in the dimly lit cowshed, but Mama remains unmoved by it. She's softly singing under her breath. She used to sing this lullaby to us all the time. Hush-a-bye baby on the treetop, when the wind blows the cradle will rock. And now she's singing Hush-a-bye baby up in the sky. Up in the sky, on a soft cloud, it's easy to fly. When the clouds burst, the raindrops will fall, and down will come baby to mother once more. Outside in the empty street, little boys in red, dressed as langurs, pass by, beating on drums. Thank you, that's I think that's reading.
Only reading is over. It's the only thing, if you want to ask, but
there is a little reference of langurs, I will tell you, in Punjab, when जब कोई बेटा नहीं होता किसी घर में and the couple makes a मन्नत कि हमारे यहाँ बेटा भी पैदा हो, तो जो पहला बेटा पैदा होता है उसको हनुमान जी की फौज सेना में भर्ती कर देते. Like the little toddlers are dressed in red and silver and gold and all over crowns and beating on drums. पूंछ भी होती है, सब कुछ होता है, तो beating on drums and this pile of little boys dressed in red, they just are walking down in the street, and I just imagine that they are passing by, but they are the firstborn, and Sunny was the firstborn, the son, the boy in the family. So the book has been quite cathartic actually in the writing of it, as much as it has been exhilarating and putting down of memories. At the same time, it's been like quite an experience, because you go through not only your own pain, you go through the pain of your parents, you go through the pain of the community, you go through the pain of the country, this whole partition, and being Amritsar being a town right across the border from, border from Lahore. Both parents having studied in Lahore, coming back across here, forever saying Lahore to Lahore, that kind of thing, and that whole nostalgia. And there was so much. I mean, I can't start talking. Let's just have a chat with all of you. And just, Shabana, anything you might want to?
How do you have such a vivid recollection? When I think of my past, I think of a blur of happiness or something, but I don't remember it in such detail. How do you remember it?
I think it's only my childhood that I remember in such detail. Only my childhood, because it was such a splendid time, and I had this such clear memory, and I also have been writing down these memories for a very long time. It's not just now, 5 साल में जब मैं लिखने बैठी and so everything is coming back. It's not coming back now. It has been coming back from a very long time, and I have been making notes, and I've been writing little scenes that I remember. Scenes from my childhood. Not the one I burned, which hardly had anything.
But
really to write
if
about.
I were to ask you who you are, what would your answer be?
I just like to think of myself as a creative soul who just feels compelled to express herself any which way, whichever medium is given to me. I mean, if I had maybe done another 150 to 200 more films, maybe I wouldn't have had this urge to express myself so much, but because I was a little picky and a little kind of, I wouldn't say over-ambitious, a little laid back. I don't think it was laid back. I don't like that word, but I was always wanting to express myself creatively. So either जो भी हाथ में चीज़ आई, अगर रोल है तो उसमें पूरी तरह से पेंटिंग है तो वो करना है. Writing is, I think, the closest to my heart. It's closest to who I am as a person. I mean, people love to call me Miss Champo and all other names, which is fine. I mean, I owe a lot to Saif Paranjpe for having created that wonderful character. आज तक उसको याद करते हैं. But what I'm saying is that that's not me. The only me is what you heard me read, and the book and my poetry is the only autobiography that I have been writing, but it has not been.
But you know, in the film industry, it is believed that unless your focus is totally on films, anything else that you do, I think theatre is something that is acceptable, but anything else that you do is considered a kind of diversion. And it seems as if नहीं, इसका दिल पूरी तरह से एक्टिंग में नहीं है. ये तो चली जाती है स्पीति में, घूमती है, पेंटिंग करती है, गाना गाती है. इसके बारे में, because they are not able to put you in a box, they don't know how to deal with you.
Yeah.
Have you had to struggle with that, or do you just go with the flow?
I think yeah, I've been depressed about that. That they don't really care to know who I am. 2-3 अच्छे सक्सेसफुल रोल से वो छाप जो है वो लगा देते हैं. दीप्ति नवल स्पेस तो मिस सो एंड सो, नेहा of this film, Sadhvi of that film, and all that, and then it's very convenient. So, but also that is what cinema does, right? I mean, whatever image which you've been able to portray successfully, whatever role you've been able to portray successfully, that becomes your limitation, that becomes your tragedy. तो उनको लगता है अब यही बस अच्छा कर सकती, ये इसीलिए suitable है. I'm sure many of us agree with this here. But writing is closest to me. When I was in school, I was writing. Kiran Bedi was my senior in school.